I work at the UN in New York, and I'm a communications officer. So what I do is I tell the world how amazing the UN is. So just by a sort of hands, how many of you think that the UN is pretty good? How many of you think that the UN is okay? How many of you think that the UN is a little bit useless or not that good? Thank you for the honesty. And I may agree with you in some areas and may not on others. So I'm going to make it this very quick and different, which is I'm going to talk a little bit about the UN, sustainability, the SDGs and all that, and then I will just open the floor for you to ask any questions you want on the UN system. Now, something I always do is I'm extremely transparent, I'm extremely honest, and I do not avoid questions. So I hope that you take advantage of this. I can get in trouble, and I get in trouble often for this, but it's perfectly fine. I think that one of the key elements for the success of the UN is understanding that we're here to serve the international community, and we need to be honest with each other. If we are not honest with each other, there's no trust. If there's no trust, there's no collaboration. If there's no collaboration, there's no change. And we need to change tons of things in the world. So my office, the civil society unit, works with NGOs, and NGOs are just a small portion of civil society. And what we do is we engage with, right now, 1,519 NGOs from all over the world. Now, that sounds like a lot of organizations that we work with, but think that the UN has identified, in the US alone, there's over 1 million NGOs. Just the US alone has 1 million NGOs. So we work only with 1,519 from all over the world, 193 countries of the UN, plus 2 observers. And that makes it hard, because we don't reach to everyone, but it makes it easier for the UN, because we get to work with partners, and we make the information pass on onto the constituencies. Youth is an incredible component of it, and I will tell you later more about it, but I'm going to start already with questions, and I know I'm going to get in trouble. I hope that Claire doesn't kill me, or Alicia, but if you have any questions, please go to the mic. I don't know if they can pass mics, but if you have to go to the mics, go to the mics. Why do you think that youth is important at the UN? And this is a real question, so please, if you want to answer, just raise your hand or go to the mic. I don't know how this is going to work. Or you don't think that the youth is important? Okay, at the very end. I guess, I don't know, I would share mine. I'm going to come down also. Exercise.
Okay. I think the youth is very important because in this new technology era, we are native to it, and we understand all the technology. We know the social media best. We have this creativity, the new things. We always come up with new things. We also come up with some dumb things as well, like the stupid challenge things. But then we come up with like the ice bucket challenge to raise fund for people. We also have some very stupid cinnamon challenge. So I think we know how to make good use of the social media nowadays to raise awareness for a lot of needed communities. We also come up with new ways. We are fearless. Oftentimes adults think it's too dangerous or like it's impossible, but children are always the one to take the risk and think that it could be possible, and we are there to make the changes.
Oh yeah, don't go away. What's your name?
Hermia. I'm from Chinese University of Hong Kong,
Hermia.
in Hong Kong.
It's a pleasure. I told you I was going to be very honest, right?
Yes.
How about youth that does not have access to technology? Don't they count?
I think that's what we have to do.
But what can they do now? I mean, right now they don't have access to technology, to internet connection, or the means or the platforms to communicate the same way that you have it. Because advocating is easy when you have those platforms. What happens with those who do not have those platforms? How do they advocate? And how do you think that the UN values them?
That's a really tricky question.
Huh? I know.
Anyone could help me?
Yeah, please. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry that you had to go again. Just.
No, I'm going to stay here.
Okay, good.
50% of the world's population are young people. They're under 30. So if the UN is not working with young people to address the issues that the Sustainable Development Goals are tackling, you're missing out a huge chunk of the population that you could be working with. So young people are no longer beneficiaries in development. They should be partners. You should be working with them. And if they don't have access to technology, then there are other grassroots measures that they can be doing in their hometowns to make a difference.
And many people will tell you, yeah, but you're too young. What can a 14, 15, 16-year-old girl or boy contribute? just go to school. Get a degree. Educate yourself. You can contribute when you grow up, okay? When you're 18 or 30 or maybe 40 or maybe never, depending on society.
Yes, we are, like a lot of adults think we are too young, but then let's take climate change, let's take climate strike. But then by the time we grow up, it might already be too late. Like we can't make changes anymore. It's too late for us to make changes, so we have to voice out right now.
Thank you. Good. Okay. Yeah, you can give them applause because they deserve it. I'm going up so that all of you can see me. Let me tell you something. Back in 1945, when the world came together to create the United Nations, we had very specific geopolitical challenges. We came out of the Second World War, and we had enemies that hated each other. They were at war with each other. The world was in pretty bad shape. And when the international community came together, including civil society or NGOs, to create the UN, they had in mind one thing. Do not repeat the same mistakes that we have made in the past. Let us work together so that we can come as a United Nations organization to prevent this from happening again. But that was 1945. Move to 2019. Is the world the same today as it was in 1945? What has changed? Many things. The main thing is that besides the geopolitical challenges and enemies that we may have, we have a new form of challenges. We call them ideological challenges. And how do you fight ideas? Do you think that bombs and bullets can prevent ideas from spreading? Do you think you can stop an idea with a bullet? Can you kill an idea with military personnel or intervention? The UN, throughout these 75 years, we turn 75 years next October 24th. That's our birthday. The UN has changed the world in ways that we could not have imagined. We have, for example, redefined the concept of peace. Peace is no longer not being shot at or being in a peaceful place where you don't have conflict. Peace is quality of life, having access to resources. Peace means that you can thrive and be happy. Peace is the way to build societies. Peace is having clean energy and sustainable resources. And the UN, throughout these 75 years, has evolved and morphed into something like that. It is an organic institution that has changed and is able to address all these challenges and issues with new approaches. Not so much through the Security Council intervention with resolutions and sanctions that we all hear on TV, which is what sells a lot, the bad news. But how about the good news? How about that UNICEF, since 1946, has saved more children's lives than the rest of the world combined because of access to education and vaccination and health for children? How about that? Why don't we see that on TV more often? When people ask me, why is the UN so useless? Well, define UN. Are you telling me that the member states, the 193 member states of the UN plus the 2 observers are useless in coming to agreements? I may agree with you, because they don't come to agreements very often. Sometimes it's very hard to imagine having 193 CEOs of a company come into an agreement. That's what we experience at the UN. So how to address that? We have different organs of the UN. There's 6 different organs of the United Nations, and the Security Council is the one that is on TV all the time that we may blame for Syria or Sudan or Yemen or any other conflict that we have in the world, or any peace and conflict situation. And it's easy to blame the Security Council as the UN at large. But the UN is much more than that. And allow me to say that the UN is you. Why do you think that I say that the UN is you? Because when in June of 1946, the UN Charter was created, it began with we the peoples. Not with we the leaders of the world, not we the governments of the peoples, not we the cool diplomats, is we the peoples. And that spirit remains today. It's just hard to remember this sometimes when you see so many conflicts and so many situations in the world. But I am a person of faith. I'm a religious person. And I would say that the most important blessings in life are the invisible ones, the ones that we don't see. We have not had a third world war, right? Perhaps it's because of the UN actions and the work that we are doing. We're trying to. And perhaps it's because we have identified that we need to work in partnership with the people. The new word of the UN, besides sustainability, is multilateralism. And multilateralism means let's work together. Let's listen to everyone, young and not that young, civil society, private sector, media outlets, the United Nations system and member states governments. Working together, we can truly make a difference. Well, what happened is in 2015, September, the international community came together at the UN and we came up with a plan of action. It's called the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. And part of the agenda is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And those goals are the reflection of, okay, let's look at the world in 2015. Looking towards 2030, let's see the challenges that we have, and let's adapt the work of the United Nations to those challenges. Let us not think that, again, is just preventing conflict and preserving the peace, but it's much more than that. How about human rights? How about development? How about economic development? How about happiness? How many of you know that there's a country that has the new index for well-being in the country is not the GDP, but is the index of happiness? Bhutan. Now, how do you measure happiness? Well, it's individual, obviously. It depends on the individual, but it depends on the region. Happiness in Spain, my country, is not the same as happiness in Malaysia, perhaps, or we don't approach the same way. How do you make sure that you're inclusive? Well, in 2015, what made a difference with these SDGs is that we listened to people. The member states or the countries, they listened to the young people too. And we came up with a plan of action. And every year, in July, we review this plan of action. It's called the HLPF at the UN, or the High Level Political Forum. And every July, we say, okay, how are we doing? Are we getting there? Are we gonna meet the goals? Are we gonna achieve them? Are we gonna end poverty and eradicate hunger and have clean energy for everyone, or have clean waters? So that's the idea, and it's working with institutions outside of the UN that we can accomplish this. Well, the most important group that we can work with is youth. And listen, I'm 38, and I think I'm young still, so I consider myself young. Anyone under 95, okay? So the president, the prime minister of Malaysia is also young. But anyone under 95 is young. But think that youth engagement is important for one reason. Let me get a little bit political here and get in trouble. And I always use this example, and I hope you don't mind me doing it. Brexit. Ooh. So you may or may not agree with Brexit. How many from the UK here, by the way? Okay. So I hope that you allow me the license to explaining my opinion as a European citizen from Spain, working at the UN, and seeing from the outside the problem with a referendum or a voting that did not allow for young people to participate. 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Why? Because what has happened in the UK is a perfect reflection of what happens when you say, not today, tomorrow. Your voice cannot be heard today because you're not of age. You're not important today because you have nothing to, you have so much to learn. Wait, but the problem with Brexit is that someone has decided for you, people in the UK, young people, what your future is going to look like. Your rights, your access to the European Union, the free transfer to the Schengen zone. And that is a decision that was made for you without you being consulted. How did it feel? Amazing, right? It's a rhetorical question. Of course it sucks. It sucks because you want to be part of the system. You want to decide on your future. In the UK and elsewhere, why can't young people participate actively in political life? Why can't young people decide for themselves on certain rights? Why? Well, why is because I think that some people are too afraid that 50% of the population is young, and they may not agree with the other 50%. That you may know better, not only because of social media and the different platforms that you have, but because you are no longer biased by history. I was talking with one of your professors from Australia, and I said, you see, the great thing about the world today is that we need to come to the realization, and young people have come to, that the real challenges are not in the past. That's baggage. The real challenges are in the future. And unless you look towards the future and come up with solutions for tomorrow, and stop thinking about how things did not work yesterday, we're not going to get very far. And the problem is that that baggage is sometimes a huge burden because it prevents us from knowing what can we do if we did that. How can we achieve certain goals when we could not do it in the past? What is different today that didn't happen yesterday that can help us change the world? And again, you are the answer. I'm known for saying one sentence, and is that, trust me when I say that the UN needs you way more than you need the UN. You are the real actors of change. The UN is there. There's 75,000 of us working at the UN. There's 7.5 billion people in the world. If we think that the solutions are in the hands of 75,000 people for 7.5 billion people in the world, we are in trouble. So we need to engage with partnerships. Let me tell you something. I am the focal point for faith-based groups at the UN for my Department of Global Communications. And many people criticize me and other people for engaging with religious traditions. Oh, religion is the cause of conflict. Look at radicalization and terrorism and all this violent extremism that exists in the world. Religion is behind it. So how can you justify working with religious traditions? So let me tell you a fictitious story. I have never been to Afghanistan, but let's say that I went to anyone from Afghanistan. Perfect. So imagine that I, Felipe, cool from the UN, nice picture that I had before, shows up in Afghanistan and says, hi, my name is Felipe. I come from the United Nations, pretty cool, huh? And I have a plan of action. It's called Agenda 2030 with 17 goals. You're gonna love them, because I'm gonna show you how you can live your life in your village, remote village in Afghanistan, so I can tell you how you had to do things. How do you think the Afghani people are gonna receive me? Who are you? You don't look like us. You do not speak our language. You certainly don't share our religion or our culture. And you think that from the outside you're going to tell me how to live my life, knowing what I know from my life and my history and my past and my family? And who do you think you are? From the UN? Go back to New York. Enjoy life in New York, and good luck with your goals. Now let's change the narrative. And imagine that I engage with local imam at the mosque. And I explained to the local imam the relationship that exists between the Quran and the plan of the UN, Agenda 2030. And let me be honest with you. The UN is not doing something innovative, okay? It's not something new. Faith traditions and religious traditions have been doing this work on humanitarian affairs for thousands of years. We have been cool in putting a brand to it, SDGs, 17 icons. We market it well, and it looks like pretty amazing. Nothing new. To those who really know the work of civil society, nothing new. So when I can explain to the local imam the importance of Agenda 2030 and how it relates to the Holy Scriptures, and how his people, his community, his congregation can benefit from it, next time he goes into the mosque and explains sustainability or charity or hunger or peace, if he is able to explain the Agenda 2030 to his congregation or to his people, the message will be much better received than if I explain it to them. So the important thing is not me, is you, is the message. I'm here to share a message with you. And the reason why is that for as much as we know, and we know a lot of the UN because we have experts and all that, we rely on people who really know the congregations. And let me tell you something. My job is to find ways to translate the UN jargon language, or the language that we use at the UN, into the language of communities that I go to, and I can explain this message to, so that then they can replicate it and teach and share with their friends and colleagues. And again, this goes by working with youth. It is you who can make a real difference, and it is you, the ones that can really implement change. So this plan of action would be nothing without you. We have a youth strategy. I invite you to Google it, UN Youth Strategy. And as the UN taking really seriously how we have to consult and talk with youth to be able to change the world, to make it a better place. So I'm done with my talk, and I hope that I can engage better with you with your questions. But I want to, perhaps just one more thought, and is the UN began as a dream of people who wanted to change the world and make it a better place. That dream was reignited in 2015 with the SDGs. But please don't wait until it is too late. Those who know me from Thailand or elsewhere, don't wait to be invited to do good. Don't wait to be invited to the table, to be in part of the discussion, because that invitation may never come. You want to be part of the conversation? Bring a chair to the table, bring your own chair, and talk. Don't wait to be invited to do good, because trust me, very hardly, the UN will not knock on your door, will not knock on your door asking you, could you please do some good in your community? That is not going to happen. We talk about leadership today. The Prime Minister is an example of leadership. We have seen other examples of leadership. But let me tell you, leadership for me is born at home. Leadership is when you do the dishes, and when you make your bed, and when you just clean, or when you just tidy up. And I know it sounds cheesy and stupid, but give me the license of explaining why. how can you imagine a global leader, someone that you admire and you look at, as a global leader who truly loves and serves other people that he or she does not know? How can that person do that when he or she is not able to do the same at home with people he loves? Can you fathom that? Can you imagine that? Is it possible? Can you truly be a real leader, a global leader, who only focuses on people for X reasons, when you're not able to be a true leader at home, when you're not able to serve your own people? So I don't think it's possible. So I would say, if you want to become a global leader, well, you're a little bit old now to start beginning to become a global leader, but it's never too late to start changing. And you can start in your family, and then you go back into your community, your neighbors, or your immediate friends. And then you can expand a little bit to your local community, and maybe your municipality, and be part of local politics, or an association, or an NGO. And then think big, but step by step is how you will change and how you'll become a real leader. So again, at the UN, we need you to understand that it is now that you have to become a leader, not tomorrow. That you don't have to be invited, you don't need to be invited, and you should not wait to be invited. And that truly, change starts wherever you think it should start. If you believe in a cause, fight for it. So long as it's a worthy cause, and fight peacefully, obviously, but fight for change for good. And you will see that, again, I use Malala as an example. She fought for girls' rights and education. And you don't need to be shot at to become a global leader, by the way. But she did that, and she overcame that obstacle. She became a global advocate. She is a peace messenger for the United Nations, a messenger of peace. And she's also a peace laureate, Nobel laureate. So again, just one girl who just fought for girls' education, and now she's changing the world. And because of her, millions of girls around the world have access to education, or they are inspired to make a difference. So be that change. And don't wait to be invited. Please, just make sure that you know that. Because if we wait a little longer, we said it today, we have no time to waste. My former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, there's no plan B because there's no planet B. There's no time to waste because we cannot waste time. It is today or tomorrow will be too late. And it is today with you, not without you. Don't wait or don't think that 2030 will come and you will inherit the world and you can continue working in that world. You need to work today, as I said. So the UN needs you and needs you inspired and motivated. This is the perfect symposium to do it. I'm very thankful that they found space for the UN to be present here, because I think that the UN is not given the credit that it deserves, not because I work at it, because they pay my paychecks or at the end of the month, but because truly I believe that the UN is the best hope for humanity, is the best endeavor that one can engage in. And yes, I will not become a millionaire working for the UN because salaries are not that great, but I get to go to sleep very well at night thinking, hey, we did some good in the world today. We made a difference, and some people are better off because of what we did today. We may not be in the cover of the newspapers, or CNN may not be reporting on how amazing life is in certain countries because of the work of the UN, but guess what? People know, and people who benefit from it, they know. And that is enough reward for those of us who work at the UN who truly are motivated to change the world slowly, maybe one NGO at a time in my office, maybe one person at a time, but it happens. So, okay, enough from me. The floor is yours. You can ask any questions you want. I know that they're mics, so you can just line up, and you can ask anything about the UN. If I know the answer, I will answer them. So I don't think that you need to raise your hands. I think that you can just walk to the mics and then ask the questions. And then I don't know if there's a moderator or I can choose who, but let's start here.
Awesome. My name's Vivian. I'm from the States. My question for you is, how do you go about rebuilding relationships with communities that have been burned in the past?
By whom? By the UN?
By the UN or any other non-profit or someone who came in stating that they want to make a change?
You see, I think that the key is that we need to learn that to make a difference, we need to listen to people. That we have been used for years. We thought, let us tell you. What I explained, I'm going to Afghanistan, I'm going to tell you what you need to do in your community. Let me share with you that, how about if I listen to you? How about if I understand that democracy, for as beautiful as it is, has many different versions? That there's no one size fits all for all countries. That is not that my country is going to go to another country and I'm going to teach democracy. I'm going to show them how to do it, because it is not naturally born. It's artificially implanted, and it will not root, and it will die. And we have seen the examples recently. So how do we do this? We listen to people. We understand where they come from, their challenges, their fears, their culture, their religion. And when we understand the whole background, we can share with them ideas and engage with key leaders so that we can say, okay, how about if you try this? Let us help you. What do you need? Instead of saying you need this, as what do you need? What can we do for you? And then you will see that real change happens. And communities have been damaged by the wrong actions of people working on behalf of the United Nations and other countries, other entities. I think that, as I said, the key to a better world is looking towards the future, not living in the past. Because that burden is really, really slowing us down, and we don't have the luxury of time right now. So let us try to think, okay, how can we truly engage together? But let me learn from you, because the UN needs you to understand what your community needs and what your people need. And trust me, our goal is to help you. So we can help you better if we know what you need and know what we assume you need.
So do you just approach it with a humility?
Sorry, I can hear you.
You just approach it with the humility viewpoint then, when you're making these connections?
I think you got, go on, Mike. All levels. I think that it goes to all levels. I mean, people, you know, the two main challenges that UN is facing right now is, first, the lack of public support, because of, second, the lack of public understanding of who we are and what we do. People don't have an understanding of who we are. So we go into educating. You see, I told you that the UN has changed a lot, and our mission is now threefold, in my opinion. Okay, this is not official, but this is how I see it. In order to face the new challenges of the world, you need three things: education, communication, and diplomacy. Quality education, quality communication, and quality diplomacy. And education is the one that you get academic institutions, places like this. Informal, that was formal. Informal education, family, friends, talking with neighbors. And then public information, media and entertainment that I consume. The newspaper, the movies that I watch, that is my education portion. I become an individual by consuming all through this. Communication is how I relate to other people. And diplomacy is how I talk with my not-so-friends to come up with solutions. The UN is there to say, okay, what is it you need? What is in Venezuela that you need that you're not agreeing with Colombia? And what is that the international community? Can we talk about this? And the UN is a platform. It's an arena to come and to have dialogue, to discuss, to talk about it. Come to the UN. Let's talk about these things. You need a mediator? Happy to do so. We're not going to give you the answers, but we can help you find the solutions. You cannot, and this goes, and I repeat this also a lot, you don't need to empower communities. And this whole concept of empowerment, please change the narrative, because I think it's toxic sometimes. Women, young people, let me ask you both, women and young people, do you need to be empowered by anyone? No, you need to empower yourselves. Women, ladies in the room, you don't need men to empower you. What you need to do is men to step out of the way and allow for you to empower yourselves. Youth, exactly the same thing. You don't need anyone to empower you, to give you any power, to give you anything. What you need is to be allowed to do what you do best, which is come up with innovative ideas, with solutions, with new approaches to all challenges. And trust me, we're learning a lot. So how do we engage with those communities? At what level? At all levels. And how do we make sure that things change? By listening, I think.
Thank you.
Do you think that international law is going to survive, and how can we maintain respect for it?
So the rule of law, the importance of the rule of law is probably the umbrella of the UN Charter. The three pillars of the UN, peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development, or development as they call it in 1945, are the pillars of the creation of a better world. A new world order with, those are distractions, okay? I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe that, I don't pay attention to these, and I hope that you understand that I do it with all the respect, but this sometimes nonsense we speak about, it's just there's an ulterior motive. What is your motive? To be good. For your family, for your community, for you to be happy. Trust. I'm going to quote a TV show from the United States. Have you seen Madam Secretary?
Yeah.
You know about it?
Yeah.
There's an amazing episode where there's a scare. There's like a concept of the U.S. thinks that Russia has launched 400 nuclear missiles towards the U.S. and they're preparing, so they're responding, and they have 5 minutes to respond. The president decides to respond with response number 1, I think they call it, which is, okay, all the U.S. arsenal nuclear is going to be dumped on Russia. It's a false alarm. You find out later on But they thought it's impossible to be a false alarm, and he happened to be a false alarm. At one point, Madam Secretary Elizabeth McCord, which is the Secretary of State of the U.S., travels to the Bahamas, Barbados, I don't know where it is, in the Caribbean, to see the Foreign Minister of Russia. And she asks him, can we de-escalate? Can we prevent something like this? She doesn't tell all the details, but he knows that something happens. He says, okay, listen, you need a drink, sit down. And when she says, can we do this? The response of the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs is really shocked me, and I think the producers really got right. Is, Elizabeth, we care about our children as much as you care about yours. The motivations of countries, we may consider them political foes or enemies, but they're protecting the best interests of their people. If we ensure that we have global leaders that have that in mind, we may disagree on how we approach certain things, but we need to ensure that we work together on these solutions. The UN is exactly there for that. And again, sometimes it's difficult to face those challenges, and sometimes it's difficult to understand one's fault and to say, okay, my role is one specific, or I have a specific motivation, my people have voted for me, the United States has a president now, so America first, and the rest of the world doesn't exist, or again, that rhetoric of one world order really doesn't exist, except for the minds of some people, and it is not a reflection of the people in the world. Let me tell you something, and I usually get gas with this, but I think that the election of President Trump in the United States was a very good thing. Why do you think that I say that? Oh, you're going to find an answer? Okay, I can let me.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was like a
oh, no,
question.
Okay, you want to answer? Go ahead. Why do you think that the election of President Trump in the United States was very good? Very, very good, in fact.
I think it brought people together. They recognized their common values and their common goals through his election.
Agree. And even more important, all of a sudden we find officially that a large portion of the US population identifies with that rhetoric or with the narrative. So now it is in the open, it's out in the open. It was the problem. President Trump is a symptom or a reflection of a sentiment of the American people that was dormant for a long time and finally came out. Unless you know the issue, you cannot address the issue. Unless you know the reasons why things happen, you cannot prevent it from happening again or from changing. And I'm not saying that I'm pro-Trump or against Trump. I'm neutral. I'm from the UN. But from the reflection of how the politics, I have to be neutral. But as a reflection of the politics of the United States towards the United Nations and how the US is handling the UN or is trying to engage with us, we have seen a distancing. They have separated a little from us through UNFPA, the elimination of funding, criticism towards some of our programs, thinking that the UN is not that entity that is going to solve the problems of the world. But the UN is a place where, as I said, we can come together and talk. And even people who may disagree with us, they will find value in coming to the UN. That's why, well, he just appointed, Congress just passed the new ambassador to the UN from the US, former ambassador of Canada, to Canada from the US. This concept, as you said, of the one world order, or this, again, is not the reality of the sentiment, of the feelings of the people. And the good thing about the United States is that if you don't like the president, you can take him out. You can just, okay, vote against him, or impeach him, or vote for someone else next time. So there's a checks and balances system that happens in most places in the world. Not all countries have that system. Not all countries are protected against abuse or dictatorships or that kind of bad leadership. But there are mechanisms to prevent it, and the UN monitors those situations, and we try to help identify solutions for those problems. So, sorry, I don't believe in one world order. I don't believe that the world is, I think that we are in the best situation we have ever been in history, and I think that we have the tools and the willingness of the young people to change the world for the better and change political structures and systems if need be. So, what are you doing to change what you don't like in your country? And what are you doing to make sure that whoever you elect as prime minister or as the head of the state or government of your country is going to impact the UN and the global community? So think about it, and then, again, the solution starts from one, because the power of one is real. We talk about Malala, but we can find in many other examples. So if you think that there's an issue with one world order, okay, address it, but I don't think there's one. I think that we have more impending issues, and climate is one of them. And I know that some people don't believe in it, but trust me, I'm experiencing it right now. So I don't do well in hot weathers, but yeah. So let's work together for that. But don't believe everything you hear in the media, by the way, about these conspiracies or these systems. It's just not true.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Hi, my name's, oh, that's really loud, Kay Crawford. I'm from Queensland University Technology in Australia. As you said, some of us here have been told not today, but tomorrow because of our age, and I think that because of our age, it should be today and not tomorrow. So I just wanted to ask how we can engage the UN to enable and support our dreams and our goals and some of our callings.
So we have the United Nations, the Secretary General Envoy on Youth is an appointed person. Her name is Jafma. She is specifically appointed to engage between, or to liaise between youth and the United Nations system, to listen to young voices and incorporate into the UN system. My department, we created what we call the Youth Steering Committee. We listen to youth, or to young voices from civil society and NGOs, and we listen, okay, what do you think that we should be changing? What do you think that we should be doing different? And how do you think that we should approach these things? And for the first time in history, 2 years ago, the Security Council had a group of young people telling them why they thought that young people become radicalized and terrorists. Why? Again, how can you try to find a solution to a problem when you don't engage with the key actor that you're talking about? I mean, how can you say, oh, let's talk about youth empowerment? And then I'm going to tell you a true story. We created a working group at the UN a few months back for my department on youth, a youth initiative. No one in the group of the 20-something people were under 40. Yeah, 40 is young. I better think that, otherwise I'm old. But how do you do that? I mean, how do you change the mentality? How do you, well, it's changing the tip. It's listen to people who really have something to say. And again, make sure that you open your mouth and you say something. And you have great platforms. Social media is one of them. Become an advocate. You know, Greta now with whole protest for climate, and now she's taken to come to the UN for the Climate Summit in September. And there are many young voices out there. Join them. Empower yourselves. Just come together and do something. And I think that key is civil society. Civil society is important because real change, think of civil rights movement in the US. It was not a government movement, it was a civil society movement. It's people protesting peacefully, but protesting. Change came about. Now, be mindful, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial with this, with the current situation in Hong Kong and again the protests. When you protest, when you fight, have a strategy. Do not protest just for the sake of protesting, because that works today. Tomorrow what? What if you accomplish that people listen? Then do you have something to say? Or you would just protest them for the sake of protesting? Are you just fighting the fight because it's cool to get into the fight ring? Or do you really have a plan of action? Do you have a strategy that you want to move forward with, that you really want to change? So have a long-term vision, not a short-term vision. Those don't work. The Arab Spring in Egypt, December 2010, it could have become something much more powerful, but there was no strategy behind. There was just the movement, the inertia, the energy. Young people bring we want to change things. How? And what afterwards? And what is the plan? And what if something doesn't work? Do you have a plan B? Do you have an alternative? What is it you expect? What if people listen? Because most people don't think that you're going to be listened to. So again, be wise in how you protest or initiate movements. Associate with organizations and individuals who are similar-minded to you and who can really change things. And then make sure that your strategy is long-term and it impacts everyone, not just you. When you're selflessly motivated, things don't tend to last very long. But when you work in communities or with groups, things tend to work much better.
Thank you.
No problem. I appreciate that. If you applaud for them, yes, but for me, it's just just done. Thank you, though. I mean, I appreciate it. It's just that it's your time, not mine. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shingi.
Where are you from?
I'm from Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, cool.
Yes. So I have a question regarding the structure of the Security Council.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that we have like 5 countries who are permanent members, and they have the power to veto any resolution they want. So my question is, what are your thoughts on the current structure in relation to other countries that don't have that much power, and how it can affect the growth and development of those countries? Because if somebody can easily veto something they don't agree with.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the video people to stop recording, okay? It sucks. It's not very effective. And I understand the criticism. Think of this. The Security Council is a structure that was created for 1945, trying to operate in 2019. Let's see how it works. The tool needs to be adapted. The problem we find at the UN is that reform of the Security Council cannot be done unless the 5P permanent members, the US, the UK, Russia, China, and France, give up voluntarily their veto power. Do you think that's going to happen anytime soon? Do you think the US is going to say, oh, we love the world so much. Here's our veto power. We trust Russia and China so much, just take it. And Russia and China will say the same, and the UK is saying, wait, someone has to mediate. And France is going to say, okay, no. So, again, we face a challenge. The challenge is that I said that the UN organically evolved to become a better structure for 2019. Well, that's not true for the Security Council. Don't get me wrong, the Security Council has prevented conflict and has assisted with peacekeeping operations all over the world and has done tremendous good. No doubt about it, they have. But they have not been able to prevent all the conflict or to solve situations like Syria, for example. And we cannot do it because the UN is not an all-powerful entity, a one world order that can impose ideas and sanctions or solutions to anything. We are here to dialogue, to talk among each other. And the problem is the Security Council is not listening very well and is not talking to each other or to everyone. The solution would be for the reform of the Security Council. Many of us, many in the world, are advocating for the reform. Should it be expanded to 15 member states, all of them with veto power? Should veto power be eliminated? Should it be expanded to the General Assembly, 193? So it's more democratic. I mean, is an effective Security Council one that has veto power? Has veto power really prevented conflict in the world from escalating, or has it prevented from bad consequences from action? So. I wish I had the answer. If I had it, I probably would be a millionaire now. but no, not interested in money, but it's a complicated situation because when the UN Charter was created, they never foresaw the need for the Security Council to be reformed. They live with the challenges of the past, and we're stuck in the past with that institution. We want to change it. We have the motivation, the desire, the energy, the people to do it. Is that the system is not facilitating it. So perhaps a good global leader will come one day and say, listen, let's talk seriously about peace and security in the world. Let's talk about what it really means. How do we protect the rights of everyone, and how do we ensure that everyone has sustainable development? Because we're not working very well with this. And the problem is that most of the challenges that are very visible are invisible to first world countries. They're only visible to those who are in need. And many people in the US, if you ask them what the UN is there for, they'll tell you, for poor countries in Africa. And they really believe that. They feel that the UN doesn't do anything for anyone else other than just that. And the Security Council doesn't affect them or doesn't impact their lives. We need to educate people on that. You are a perfect generation to know, to learn, to embrace the UN, the idea, the concept, reform it within yourselves and see, okay, how can we modify this? How can we change these things? And then bring about the change. And I promise you that when people gather together, things can happen and change happens. We have seen it constantly in history. It's just you need to be loud enough to do it, but have a strategy and a plan of action. So how do we change the Security Council? Complicated legally. The rule of law establishes that, again, we abide by the UN Charter. It's like a constitution of sorts, but it's not impossible because the UN was created by people. People can modify the UN.
All right, just one follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
So from what I'm getting is you don't agree with the structure at the moment?
I don't.
And do you think that if the UN is broken structurally, is it the best organization to take us into the future? And if so, why?
So it is not a broken organization. It is one that is imperfect. Is it the organization that brings the absolutely. I would not be working at the UN if I didn't think that is the best hope for humanity or the best organization in the world to bring about change. There's so much more good. If we balance things, good and bad things that the UN has been part of, it's overwhelmingly so much better than worse, the world, because of us. Not because of us, because the amazing people who work at the UN plus me. And it's just, there's no doubt that the UN is necessary and is the best. And we have learned, we have changed, we have evolved, we have changed the world. As I said, we changed the definition of peace, but we changed the definition of well-being and climate protection and women's rights and children's rights. Don't get me wrong, it is not a perfect organization, but definitely is the best organization right now on earth to change things for the better. So be patient, but be proactive also. Be patient, but be proactive. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chia. I'm from Malaysia, but I'm studying in the University of Queensland in Australia.
You have an amazing country, by the way.
Yep, thank you.
I love Malaysia. My first time here.
I always wanted to work in the UN, and we assume that anybody or everybody that works in the UN or wants to work in the UN has this noble heart to serve humanity and things like that. But my question is this: who or what structures or organizations are the ones that provides the checks and balances for an organization like UN? For example, there is a 2017 movie called Backstabbers for Beginners, where we see a group of
Food for Oil program.
Yep, a senior leader in UN that saw an opportunity to exploit the compassion of the general public for his personal gain. So who provides the checks and balance for UN?
People do. The own UN system does, and history does. We have not repeated the same mistakes that we made with the Food for Oil. And don't get me wrong, when Kofi Annan came up with a program, and I don't know if you're familiar with the program, but the program was taking the responsibility of the oil in the Middle East, a specific country, through which they could be responsible for the trade of it and then purchase food for the population of the country. And it did not work because of corruption. And it's a very clear example of corruption. Same with, I don't know if you have seen the movie The Whistleblower, with Rachel Weisz, which she goes into Europe, Eastern Europe, and finds out that UN diplomats and UN peacekeepers are trafficking with women and exploiting and torturing them. We have learned from those things to the point that that movie was shown at the UN. There was a screen at the UN with the director of the movie and the real people the movie was based on, and we talk about how the UN has changed. The people are the watchdogs on what is happening. The UN has mechanisms. We have learned lessons, sometimes too late. Sometimes way too late. The Central African Republic case of peacekeepers raping little boys in exchange for cookies and milk is one of the most recent ones 4 years ago. And we have learned, we have changed the system for recruiting peacekeepers. And we look into backgrounds and we ensure that there are protection mechanisms and that the whistleblowing protections really exist. We have the ethics office at the UN right now. We have OIOS, internal oversight, which is let's say the auditors of the UN. We have the ombudsman's office. We have developed many mechanisms to prevent this from happening, including sexual harassment and all that. What happens when someone misbehaves is a someone who misbehaves that happens to work at the UN. It's not the UN misbehaving. And I want to make that distinction. That people are good by nature. I believe that people are very good by nature. We just corrupt ourselves throughout history, throughout our lives. We just somehow change paths and become, I don't know, tempted by money or power or something else. But it's people. People who work as doctors, police officers, janitors, it doesn't matter. You can work anywhere. If you make mistakes or you just corrupt yourself, the higher you are in the chain of command at the UN, the more impactful your wrongdoing will be. But the mechanisms or the checks and balances system for the UN are internal and also external. We have a UN Watch. It's an NGO that keeps an eye on the UN and criticizes a lot about things that we do. We have bloggers, there's a blogger called Matthew Lee, very popular or unpopular in New York, who keeps fighting the lack of access to certain information that he wants to have on, and he denounces certain situations, and he just pokes hard sometimes, and the UN doesn't like it always, but it's good to be monitored. It's good to know that we're not almighty and that we have mechanisms. And we at the UN, those of us who work at the UN, because we believe in humanity, we want those mechanisms to be there and to be effective and to be powerful so that we can change things. We believe in change. If something has to change, let's change it. We are not afraid of it. We are afraid of becoming useless. And hopefully that will never happen.
All right. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Fadi from Western Sydney University in Australia. Felipe, you said as you mentioned, you've worked with the UN. I want to ask you, what's your biggest achievement working with the UN? What are some of the challenges you faced and how you overcame those challenges?
My biggest achievement is surviving at the UN. Is a bureaucratic system that sometimes it really demoralizes you. But when you understand the game you're playing, and when you understand the rules that you're playing with, it is absolutely worth it. I have, without a doubt, the best job in the world for me. I would not, when I've offered to work in the private sector and with civil society, making up to 4 times the amount of money that I make right now at the UN, and I'm not a hero or anything by saying, I'm such a good person that I turn it down, is that I truly sleep well at night. I really think that we are making a difference. And I have no children, I'm not married, I'm a single man. I have a niece, hopefully one day I'll get married and have children, but I really, really believe in the cheesy concept of what kind of world are we living behind us? What is our legacy going to be? And you see, I told you I'm a religious person. I believe that whatever you do in life, and it was mentioned today, but it's true, whatever you do in life, make sure that it makes you the best version of yourself. It brings about the very best in you. Because truly, happiness is worth any investment, any effort, anything that you had to do, any hard work is worth it by all means. I mean, don't get me wrong. So yes, there are challenges, absolutely. So my biggest accomplishment is surviving the UN thing and being happy about it. I've been working at the UN for 12 years now, and I adore my job. I mean, I have, as I said, not even once has it crossed my mind, I'm just sick and tired. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh my goodness, I have to go to work. I really don't. And I travel long hours and I meet amazing people and I get to talk with incredible young people, and it really motivates me. Hey, there's hope. Things are changing and they want to do change. So why not working with them? So my biggest, what about the other, sorry, I thought about the biggest accomplishment in just my head.
Yeah, so what challenges you faced?
Bureaucracy, and the lack of public support. I talk with people in I live in Harlem, in Manhattan, okay? And my neighborhood people say, what is the UN doing for me? Okay, it's just for, again, African people, poor people, or people who don't have rights, and female genital mutilation, and things like that. They just hear things on TV, they don't really know how to piece things together. And I always have to explain, do you receive mail, like physical mail? The UN Postal Administration handles international mailing. Do you fly? Do you take planes? Aviation security comes from the UN entity that handles aviation administration, and also the routes that you fly from one country to the other, avoiding other countries. Recently that happens because of conflict and things like that. Those are determined by the UN. Nuclear safety. The United Nations Atomic Energy Agency is responsible for determining safety measures and things. So the UN is involved in your daily life. People don't know that. So the main challenge is explaining to people, why is the UN important for you? Not just for a country, but for you as an individual. And the idea is you have labor rights because of the ILO, you have migration rights because of IOM, you have access to health care because WHO determined that certain parameters need to be established, and the FDA in the US and other countries. See, I can go on and on and on. The UN is involved in everyday life. Behind the scenes, we don't want notoriety, we just want betterment for society. So that lack of understanding from people and that lack of knowledge on us is one of the main challenges that I face. Because when I talk with people, when I said, well, things that the UN is very negative, and rightfully so, as I said, we make mistakes. But trust me, the UN is so much better than we think it is. Yeah?
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Justin Lim from Temasek Polytechnic in Singapore. So my question for you is that I think that you discussed something earlier about like an open marketplace of ideas, where because you work with a lot of people with religious beliefs, what you do is you present to them different kinds of ideas and approaches to try and convince them to work hand in hand with you. But I think the problem with the open marketplace of ideas are that some people come to the bargaining table or the negotiating table with set agendas to not cooperate with you. Or, so for example, I don't want to offend anyone here, but like climate change deniers, who obviously no matter how you try and persuade them or how you try and convince them, they're just not going to budge. So how does the UN or maybe you handle these kinds of situations?
How do you think that the right for for women to arrive in a specific country came about?
Through the civil rights movements, things like zapping, Stonewall riots.
How about talking persistently for years? Behind the scenes and in front of the camera. How about never giving up on change, because we believe that change needed to happen and it has happened? How about engaging with all leaders until you find one that is really willing to listen? Because I think it's important that coming to the table to discuss something is already a success. I really believe that engaging with someone, particularly those you don't agree with and those who oppose your views, that is success already. Because talking, communication is key. As I said, education, communication, and diplomacy. Maybe we can communicate, maybe we could diplomats, but we need to educate them on the reality of climate change. Okay, it all comes, trust me. It's a matter of patience and time, and the UN is super patient. We've been around for 75 years, and we're in pretty good shape for a 75-year-old organization, okay? So we can do push-ups and things, and we do with some member states. It's just, we get the challenge. Some military people from the US will say, we're going to fight, and we're going to fight for good. But we're going to fight the right way, which is, let's talk. You don't want to listen? That's fine. Maybe next year. Maybe when the situation is critical in some regions. But do you think we're going to stop working because one doesn't want to talk, or 20? There's 195 of us in the world. 193 member states and 2 observers. One doesn't want to talk? That's fine. This is a conversation, it's not a monologue. It's not about a Comedy Central listening to one country saying one thing. This is a real conversation with real challenges, with real people. And eventually, people, the more informed they are, the more educated they will change people who, before President Trump, who is not very fond of the climate Paris agreements, was President Obama, who was very, listen, political cycles happen. They come and go. Politicians come and go, Republican, Democrat, liberal, whatever you kind of call it. In my country, conservatives or socialists, it doesn't matter. They come and go. Right now, we are in a situation in my country where we wouldn't have a government because they cannot come to an agreement. So now we have an interim. Doesn't matter. It will pass. People remain. And those people are the ones who will vote tomorrow. And young people will vote even tomorrow. Be patient. Things change. And now I said we don't have time to waste. But talking is not wasting time. Trust me. Talking is always an accomplishment. And we at the UN are super proud that every September, the global community comes to the general debate of the General Assembly and we talk about issues. We may not like what we hear, but we talk about it. And in September, on the 23rd of September, the Secretary General has called for a climate summit at the UN, and the US is going to be present. So, hey, let's see what happens. I have faith.
All right, thank you very much.
No problem.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm from Lebanon. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about climate change. You just talked about it. The thing is that there's no time anymore. The seas are being polluted, the animals are dying, and the Earth won't sustain us more than 50 years top. So why don't the UN alert an emergency state and the rest will follow? Because I'm not just talking about nature, I'm talking about the relationship of nature and humans. A human needs nature, nature doesn't need us. So we cannot survive, we cannot eat money after everything is ruined. So why don't the UN, like you said, there's a meeting next week, why don't you issue an emergency state?
So because the UN doesn't have the authority to issue an emergency state, what we can do is we can convene the international community and have them sign agreements where they understand that implementation of those agreements have to be nationally. We believe in the principle of sovereignty. We cannot just go to a country and impose anything on that country. The country, through the electoral system that they have established, if they have one, most countries do in the world, they will have to say, how are we going to implement this plan of action? And I'm with you. We have climate refugees for the first time in history. Climate refugees and people who had to flee their countries to go to other countries because the countries are disappearing. In the Pacific Islands and Australia is one of the main recipients of them, eventually will become one of the main recipients. But everywhere is happening. We see in Africa when the droughts in Somalia, for example, are pushing people away, where women are losing their rights because they had to waste time going to get water instead of getting educated. Yeah. We see the crisis and we understand it. But we can only do so much without the willingness of the member states to act more. And we cannot impose. That is totalitarian regimes, and we don't believe in that. We believe in democracy. You can bring the horse to the water, you can make the horse drink, right? Is the whole principle. At the UN, it's exactly the same thing. We can bring the international community to the UN to talk about something. We cannot force anyone to do this. But we count on the humanity of the individuals, because there's a human component to diplomacy and politics, and trust me, I believe in it, and it's changing. We are changing things. You see, remember, I don't know if you remember, perhaps you're too young, but there was a hole in the ozone layer because of the CFCs. Where's that at? It's no longer an issue. We have other crises, but we can change things.
Way worse crises.
It's way worse right now.
Yeah.
As I said, climate is a really impending.
I'm not saying impose the idea. I'm not talking. I mean, try harder, work harder. I mean, there's no time anymore.
Okay, what are you doing for that? You're asking me to work harder. Okay, what are you doing?
I'm a student.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a small garden. I don't throw away like avocado seeds. I plant them and I like give them to people so they can plant it. Mm-hmm. I plant a tree every month, every week. Mm-hmm. I do the best I can. I may not have like the best resources, but I'm helping. I want to be the voice of the voiceless.
How about sharing that with your friends and family and explain to them?
But I cannot do that alone in a small country like Lebanon. You can't do that. You UN.
Remember what I said about true leadership is born at home? I'm not asking you to go and change the world. I'm asking you to change your household. And then everyone else can do that. Then if you're doing that, thank you. I'm trying to do from the UN perspective through a communications officer role what I can to bring awareness on those things, but we cannot impose. Same way you cannot impose on your family to do what you're doing, right? You can only invite them to do it.
Yes.
You can educate them. You can tell them the benefits of it. You can tell them how much better they will be off, but you cannot impose. We at the UN are the same. And trust me, we have the same motivation. We want the best for everyone.
You worked hard to stop wars, to prevent wars. You are preventing wars. You can prevent like more pollution.
Well, let's face one thing. Conflict is an eternal issue that we have had thousands of years to deal with and learn how to solve it. Climate change is a relatively new concept that we are learning still how it works.
Climate change, you seem like you don't believe in it.
No, I said I knew it, new, not climate. Okay. I believe in climate change. I don't believe that it's new. It's new that because we are aware of it now. But the Industrial Revolution started something that we have not been able to prevent. But because of, again, 100 years, we really don't know much about climate change. We know a lot today, but we don't know everything, how to prevent it, how to replace, every time I see online that we have a new algae that it can eat plastic or a bacteria that can, it's exciting. Or there are worms that can also eat plastic, and I real it's exciting. So we are moving forward. It's just that, again, we all need to work on this together. Yes. You cannot expect a global crisis to be handled by 75,000 people at the UN. You can't, because then we're doomed. We need much more collaboration than that. So we need 7.5 billion people educated on what climate change is and how it impacts them. How it is not just animals, which is true, or plants, which is true, but it's humans being moved away from the countries. It's humans dying. It's humans, new bacteria, new viruses, for example, coming out of frozen areas that have been frozen or dormant for thousands of years, and now they're on the air because, again, the poles are melting. So, again, understand me. I'm as concerned as you are. I'm as devastated that people don't take this more seriously. But we do this one step at a time. Trying to rush it may prove us wrong. When we rush to some conclusions that are not scientifically based and we don't have the perfect approach to things, sometimes we do more damage. And that's what has happened. One of my criticisms of climate change defenders, or those who have demonstrated that climate change is a real thing, is that we rush for the last 10 years. Perhaps we just tried to rush. We need to come up with explanations and things like that. And we came up with poor explanations sometimes that people say, hey, you see, they're wrong. They're right. It's not happening. It's not human cause. It's just a natural cycle of the earth. Be patient. I know that, again, I said we don't have time, but talking about it, and
you said we don't have plan B, so.
We don't have Planet B,
yeah,
so, and I hope that Mr. Trump doesn't think that Mars is going to be Planet B, because it's not going to work. But yeah, no, we don't have Planet B, we don't have Plan B. The plan is, let's act today, but let's do it coherently, and let's do it organizedly.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I just want to remind delegates who are asking questions that we do have a lot of participants, so please do keep your questions short and concise and to the point. We'll let the speaker have a little drink, but we'll take from this side now. Please state your name and your country.
Yeah, my name's Harry. I'm from Murdoch University in Western Australia. I'm more of a practical question, I guess, as I'm studying strategic communications. So one of the things is, what kind of barriers and challenges do you face communicating in closed markets, so places that aren't so friendly to the UN, and open market, but also conversely, what about open markets, like places like Australia, places like the US, places who are member states open to the UN, but what barriers do you face there? And how do you overcome them, I guess?
I would say the same thing, is misconceptions of what the UN is and is not, and can and cannot do, and should not be doing. Too much trust in the UN is dangerous, because we will disappoint. Too little faith in the UN is dangerous, because we won't get the support that we need. I think that the challenges as a communicator or as a communications officer for the UN is listening to people, learning from them. Because I don't have solutions to your problems. You have solutions to your problems. What I can show you is what others have done in this situations, and maybe one of them will work for you. But if they don't, come up with a new solution, let me know, and I can confer it to someone else. But I think that key in diplomacy is the listening portion of it. And in communication is the same. This is communication. This is not a monologue. This is a dialogue or conversation. This is not me telling you how amazing the UN is. I already know that. I hope that you already know that too. Is how can we work together to make a difference? How can we really come up with true solutions? And I don't know, where in Australia from?
Western Australia.
That's okay. So imagine that there's an issue in your community, and I come and say, oh, you see, Bogota, Colombia is doing this, so you should be doing, what am I talking about? What do I know about your country? When I can tell you, okay, what has worked for you? What is it you really need? What are your challenges? What is the challenges you're facing? What is the government not doing? What is the local community not understanding? And then with all that information, as long as you collect as much information as possible, you can put together a strategy and say, okay, now let's see, what is that we want to convey? What is the mechanism that we want to use to convey? What is the platform we're going to use, and who is our audience? And if my audience is not very receptive, is how can I find points of agreement with? I told you about Madam Secretary, Russia and the US saying, hey, we agree that our children are valuable to both of us. Oh, that's a good step forward. So again, always engaging with communities is important to find ways to listen to the issues and truly listen. Not pretend you're listening and saying, yeah, I hear, but... And that's why I'm going to say something also perhaps controversial. Women are way better diplomats than men. For one reason, I think that women, and I said this in Thailand 3 weeks ago, women have a natural empathy. Men have sympathy. We're sympathetic. Someone says, oh, dude, I don't know, I just had a car crash. Oh, dude, I feel for you. So sorry. You tell a woman that you have an issue, say, really? Oh, okay, what can I do? What can I do for you? I really feel for you. That kind of empathy that happens naturally, and again, maybe it's just my imagination that I think that women are more empathetic than men, but my experience has proven me right. That kind of attitude is the one that we need to learn, to be more empathetic, to listen, to really listen to people and understand, wow, this is a real challenge for them. I tell my office, whenever we have an open office for NGOs, and they come, and we have like 50 queries a day on the same issue. It tests your nerves sometimes, saying, okay, this is the 50th time I have to say this. I mean, people, but guess what? For that person, is the most important issue of the day for him or her. When you understand that, they're honest in how they open about their issues and how they really are seeking for your help, you better be ready to listen to them and then convey the message in a way that you translate what the UN is saying into what they need, if you can help. Sometimes you cannot help. Sometimes it's just a legal matter. It's like, I wish I could do more, but I can't. But hey, let's try to get this approach. Let's try to change legislation. There are always many different avenues. I'm limited into the scope and reach that I have, but listening for me has been key in understanding when I work with different communities, faith communities particularly, and even with those that agree with me. Oh, the UN is fantastic. Why don't you do why? Okay, what are you doing in that sense? What are you contributing? So, yeah.
So, is there any barriers that you would identify that we, as a collective, would be able to help with going back home?
Preconceived notions on who I am or who they are that I will not understand. People assuming that because I'm white and male, I may not understand certain issues that affect women, and I will not be able to empathize with them in that sense. And those are barriers, but that's what I'm the only man in my office, by the way. Out of the whole team, I'm the only man. Everyone is a woman, which is fantastic, because I learn a lot. And I can see how things are done differently, I can learn. But the barriers are the ones that I impose myself, that I have naturally imposed. Again, I'm not a woman, and I'm Caucasian, so there are certain things that I have never struggled with, which is racial discrimination against me. I'm Latino or Hispanic, but I don't look Latino in the US. So they look at me like, oh, an American, well, move on. And so there are certain things that will always be a barrier. But so long as I understand that those exist, and I'm mindful of them, and I understand other people have different perceptions and realities, then things can work out, and people trust you more when you say, listen, I know that I cannot feel what you feel, but I'm trying. Help me understand. Those are key elements for good communication.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Please do keep your questions one per person. We'll take one from the left-hand side now over here.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Moderator's here.
My name's Kalepi. I'm from the Australian National University. We've kind of touched on it twice through previous questions in terms of the political cycle and as well as that running out of time. Across the world, we're seeing aggression into nationalism over globalization and fear over trust. I guess my question is, do you find this a particularly difficult time to be engaged in the United Nations when we're seeing this kind of political backstaging?
The harder the challenge, the more exciting it is.
Yeah.
No, of course it is hard. And nowadays you need to understand that there are certain rhetorics that are really dangerous. In Europe, my country, with the rise of the white supremacists or the extreme right wing. Austria, Italy, France, the UK, you name it, everywhere. What's going on? What is happening? I mean, what is happening to the world that people all of a sudden feel that they can say anything they want because they feel empowered by their communities? Even Greece, for heaven's sake, they have always been so nice, and what happened to them? So what happens is that certain sentiments have not been addressed for a long time, and certain types of education have not happened. We have focused on getting a degree and not shaping the individual as a human being with values, with ethical and moral values. And we have abandoned the whole concept of what is the value of life, for example, which is extremely important. Why is life valuable in all of its forms and shapes? I'm very openly pro-life, and I would say I'm not anti-abortion, but I'm pro-life. But certain values we have seen as with certain approaches, euthanasia, death penalty, abortion, things like that. Okay, some people have an issue with those things. I'm someone who working at the UN, I have been exposed to so much that I say, okay, I understand those who support death penalty and those who don't support death penalty. Those who support abortion, those who do not support abortion, those who support, and listening to these things, I understand that there's a conversation that needs to take place. I may disagree with many people, I may agree with many other people, but unless I engage in conversation or I educate myself and I help them be educated on the other position, this is something that people have avoided. I mean, you have heard always, you don't talk about religion or politics at the table, right? Why? Because religion is extremely important for many people, politics is extremely important for so many people, and or money is, let's talk openly, let us not, because the more taboos you have in society, the more you hide certain issues, the more they become a problem, and they clandestinely or in the shadows, they will grow and become a cancer for society, and then is when they become problems when they just boom, erupt and does it. So let us talk, and I think that addressing these issues, the rise of, again, white supremacism or, again, right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism, the Antifa, just you name it. All those extremisms, all the isms are an issue that we have to address globally because they're a global issue, they're a human issue. We need to look at the human component, the political component. The political component is an excuse, by the way. They're looking at things, I never have said, and I don't say Islamic terrorism. I believe in terrorism, that some people use Islam as an excuse to be bad. Those people will find if Islam was not there, they would pick up any other thing to do terrorism or to do bad things. So we are not, and we need to be careful with the language that we use because it's important to understand that the more we repeat the same in the media, the more the rhetoric resonates on people and we start growing with biases. And Islam has received many negative biases unnecessarily and unfairly throughout history in the past years through the media. And all of a sudden it's ingrained in the people. I'm at the airport, I see someone with certain clothing, are they a terrorist? Should I report it to the TSA or the US? It has happened so often. It's like, for real? I mean, are you really that ignorant? I mean, what the heck is going on? So again, let's talk openly about these issues. Let's not hide any concerns that we may have, and let's absolutely address the lack of education that many of us have in many areas. I'm not very well versed in many things. I hope to be educated. I need to be open-minded, but I need to talk about them. So it's a world where we need to learn from each other, but listen and talk with each other, absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, delegates, we have a short amount of time left, so we're going to take 3 from each stand. The others, I will have to ask you to sit down, but please ensure that you do contribute over the next following days. There's so many opportunities for engagement, so hold your questions tight. And we'll take a question from you now. Thank you.
My name's Elizabeth. I'm from Curtin University in Western Australia, but my background is South Sudanese. I've got 1.5 question, and I say that because my first one I think you partially answered. It relates to Chi's question around accountability. But I'm just curious to know, because I think you partially responded to it by talking about changes being made to recruitment processes in the UN. But I want to know what is being done about particularly UN peacekeepers who committed human rights abuses against women and children, who they're actually entrusted to protect and to serve. So what is being done to hold them to account and to ensure that justice is served for the people that they have violated?
We are increasing exponentially the number of women in peacekeeping operations. That's one of the main issues that we have addressed. It's impossible to protect certain populations when you don't understand, you don't have the empathy for them, because you don't. So that's one of the steps that we have taken. Women recruitment in peacekeeping and all levels of the UN. Parity at the senior management level of the UN is important also. So we right now have more women than men senior managers at the UN. So that's the gender component. With peacekeepers, we do training. We do background check-in, and we do accountability, and we do monitoring. So things that we did not do in the past because peacekeepers, let's say from France, serving in the Central African Republic, they were the responsibility of the French government under the umbrella or the flag of the UN. We're trying to keep an eye on everything that happens, monitor, test with the population, see what is going on. Our Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping is now, it's not called peacekeeping anymore, it's peace buildings, it's DPPA, Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs. And as we just restructured the whole UN at the beginning of the year. And that office, what they do is they monitor the system that we have in place. We see something doesn't work, we change it. We monitor. We detect that there's a violation of human rights towards women, girls, or boys and children. We take action. We have protection for whistleblowers, which we didn't have before. Again, they're mechanisms. We have an office for ethical behavior. We have internal auditors that just go, monitor, and then report back. They need to take action. They report directly to the Undersecretary General, and he will take action. In this case, the man. So we have learned a lot from the times of Bosnia and then, well, Rwanda and the Central African Republic, which is very recent, but we continuously learn about how to do things better. We're not perfect, and we will continue hiring people that make mistakes, but we're trying to hire the lowest number of those people, and again, increase exponentially the number of women in peacekeeping operations and in leadership operations in peacekeeping and peace building.
My last question with regards to, I guess, the UN being generally, in terms of those that hold the power coming generally from Western countries, it is naturally biased because of that. I'm just going to say that. So what is being, because I've seen quite often that when there's human rights abuses or violations committed, and the UN sort of makes statements, they generally, I guess I don't see a lot of transparency in terms of when some of the conflicts that we see around the world, which are fueled by Western countries, where the UN will go silent, but is very happy to sort of advocate or write papers around abuses committed by other, say, non-Western countries. So, I mean, I don't even know how you'd answer that question, but I'm just curious.
So the Deputy Secretary General of the UN is from Nigeria, Amina Mohammed. And down from the DSG to my chief, which is a woman from Sierra Leone, she's the chief of the unit where I work. There are many women now of color, particularly many men of color. There's a new ASG for UN Habitat in Nairobi, which is a black man from the US. And
I'm referring to the system, though, not the individuals, because you can have individuals that are diverse.
Correct, but the system is not. The system is not racist per se.
I'm not saying
people,
that.
well, discriminatory or west, north or south, the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere. The system is not like that. It's the people in the system who made the mistakes and decisions. So let's address the issue. Let's educate the people, because the system is completely inert. It's just completely aseptic. It has no biases towards one way or the other unless you push it. It's a tool. The UN is a tool. Now, the tool will be as useless or as useful as the member states allow us to be, and the system itself allows us to be. So when we understand the issues, we work with OSAD, the Office for the Special Advisor in Africa. We work with the African Union. We try to understand the realities of different communities and work with that. But it's true that decision-making people, sometimes they're not aware or they're not empathetic to the system. Well, let's change that. Let's educate the people. We have training constantly for senior management and regular management of the UN, and it works pretty well. And we have eliminated certain biases. You want me to be 100% honest with you? Money is one of the main biases that you have. The more money your country has, the more power you have at the UN. Bad news. Sorry for that. That's the reality. Is it fair? Absolutely not. Do we want to change it? Completely. Do we live by the one country, one vote principle? We do at the General Assembly, but the Security Council is moved also by money. And the UN sometimes moves itself by money because we need to survive by getting funds, and sometimes countries threaten us. Oh, if you do this, I will stop the funding for the women's program in this country. We are victims. We are hijacked. We are targets of blackmail by member states sometimes. That's the reality. Whoever denies it is not an honest person. But we work with what we have, and we do the best that we can.
All right, thank you. We might move on to the next questions, just so we have enough time.
Hello and good evening. My name is Momanik. I'm from International Medical University and also a member of United Nations Association for Malaysia, especially for youth. I have one question for you. So what is the challenge that you face when you want to implement and promoting the SDGs among the youngsters, and how do you manage it? Thank you.
Okay, so the concept of sustainability is a very misunderstood concept. People don't know what sustainability means. If I ask sustainability to 10 people, they will give me 10 different definitions, and probably some of them will be close to each other, some of them are not. Sustainability is education. We need to educate people on why we need goals. And why do you think that we need goals? Because without goals, we don't accomplish things. I mean, if you have the goal of, I'm going to stop smoking by January it's my New Year's resolution. I mean, you need to have goals. That's how the human mind works. You need to have an objective, something that is visible and tangible, so that you can really work towards that and grasp it, and then, hey, I accomplished something, I did something, I'm going to move forward with this. Ethereal goals, having let's try to make the world better. Give me a break. I mean, a better place. What do you mean? I mean, how are you going to make it ice cream? So have goals, have plans of action. And that's what the Agenda 2030 is. How do we explain to people? That has been key. I wish I could have shown you a video. And it's done by Project Everyone, which is, I don't know if you know the movie Notting Hill, but the producer, Richard Curtis, has an NGO called Project Everyone. They created the icons of the SDGs for us, by the way, at the UN. It was an NGO giving them to the UN. They show how to do that. Well, that short clip was shown in the UK and in the US in movie theaters ahead of movies for a few months. Educating people by exposing them to this, we're trying. Some of us wear the SDG wheel. As you have seen, some of us haven't. That's it's my mantra. It's like, okay, there's the wheel, there's the goals, and it's a conversation starter. People say, oh, is that for the gay rights movement? Is LGBTQI, because it's colorful, it's like a rainbow? So no, it's about, hey, in part it is, but it's sustainable. Again, educating people and engaging in conversation.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. And over to this side.
Hi, my name is Liam. I'm from Queensland University of Technology in Australia.
I envy you for not wearing your jacket, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm boiling here.
I've got to bring it.
Sorry.
So my question was, from your experience working in the United Nations, what do you believe is the largest barrier to the access of justice for communities that might be in danger, such as the LGBT community or
Thank you.
indigenous communities, etc.?
For the LGBTQI community, a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, almost 10 years ago, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, determined that gay rights were human rights. So that was the first step forward. We have a gay association at the UN for employees that brings awareness on the LGBTQIA community, and we engage with different communities in that sense. Protection of minorities such as indigenous communities, we have the Indigenous Forum. At the UN every year, we gather indigenous communities from all over the world and talk about their issues. I was talking previously to one of your colleagues, and recently we have a conference that we do every year, and last year, one of the workshops was organized by an NGO criticizing Australia for the treatment of the indigenous communities in plural. And they advertised it, so we get a call from the permanent mission of Australia to the UN, say, hey, we want to talk about something with you. So, okay, here we go. So they came to the office and they said, we've heard that there's a workshop on the treatment on certain countries. It was Vietnam was one of them, and then Australia was one of them. And they said, yes. And we were expecting something, and they said, we would like to be part of the conversation. I said, well, what? Yeah. We want to talk about what has happened, and we want to show how we have learned, how we're working towards doing restorative work with certain communities, and hope that we can be listened. We hope that we can explain our point of view and also apologize if need be for some mistakes that has been done. And say, wow, that was refreshing. So where else other than the UN could that happen? So that happens on a regular basis. We have CSW, the Commission on Status of Women, a minority that has been for a long time oppressed or discriminated against. Different minorities have a voice within the UN system. Some of them are very visible, some of them are not, but trust me when I say that the human rights of every individual are protected. Why? I always use the same example. Imagine that there's a table with 20 individuals around the table, and there is a committee tonight. 19 are wolves and 1 is lamb. And the vote is, what's for dinner tonight? What do you think is going to happen to the lamb? Chops.
Yeah.
I'm going to die. It's going to be lamb chops, and it's going to be delicious, by the way. So, sorry, I shouldn't say that. But I love lambs. So what happens is, in a pure democracy system, hey, majority rules, right? Yeah. Who advocates for the minority? The UN. Through different mechanisms. We try civil rights movements, but also the mechanisms of implementation, because we educate people telling them, hey, your rights stop where your neighbor's rights start. So do not try to trump them. Do not, no pun intended, do not try to eliminate them or just eat them, because you can't, you have certain rights, she has certain rights, together you have to coexist. So we try to find those ways to work with all communities and minorities.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Okay. All right, we'll move it over this side. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sara. I'm from Venezuela. Thank you, first of all, for coming today.
Un placer.
I agree with you. I think the UN itself cannot solve the problems of the world, and we do need to include the 7 billion people that are in it. But my question is, what happens when the people in a country have their hands tied, when there is no path that they can take, and the institutions or even education that is meant to be feeding that action they are meant to take is not there?
A country or a specific country?
Okay, I'm referring to mine, but this is
Venezuela.
not only in mine.
Un placer conocerte y gracias por venir también a ti.
Gracias.
So we believe in the principle of sovereignty, as I said. We believe that countries have the right to determine their own destiny and future and mechanism of control. We have expressed serious concern on Maduro's regime and the situation in Venezuela. We understand Guaido's approach, and we understand that it is an important movement and discussion that has to take place. It almost happened a few weeks back, remember? The UN is willing to help as much as we can, but we need to be invited to that country. Now, we know that you have 2 presidents, the president and the elected president.
50% of the people invite you.
We know that you have refugees in Colombia and in my country, in Spain. Many people from Venezuela.
I live in Spain.
You live, there you are. So we are very mindful of the situation. Sounds bad when I say that I wish we could do more because we are the UN, right? So we are supposed to solve the problems of the world. But there are certain laws that we have to respect. Because if we, as an institution that is supposed to lead by example, break the rules of the game, then the hope for humanity is gone. We need to be patient. I know the situation in Venezuela, in Syria, in South Sudan, they're very, very, very complicated. We are trying to work behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, with the scenes, without the scenes, I mean, you name it. We are trying to do as much as we can. We are asking for those involved, Guaido, Maduro, and those who are diplomats. The Holy See has been involved with Cuba, for example, so different external entities that can help in negotiation. Let's bring to the table these issues and let's work with this. I don't think the solution in Venezuela or for Venezuela is outside of Venezuela.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't think that solutions to problems in certain countries, particularly Venezuela, are going to be found in New York or in Washington, D.C. That is not going to happen. Solutions that happen in those places may be very dangerous also to the people of Venezuela because of civil conflict, and we have seen examples throughout history. I want to believe that there's hope that leadership from within Venezuela will rise. We are seeing an example is maybe it's just the beginning, it's a baby step towards something, but let's hold on to that and let's have hope and faith that things will work. Because the UN is there to support as much as we can. We have denounced human rights violations. The Human Rights High Commissioner right now, Ms. Bachelet, she was in Venezuela recently and she explained certain situations. She was very amicable with the system, said, listen, we need to talk about, and conversation, as I said, just coming to the table to talk about something is a huge accomplishment. But you're Venezuelan. I cannot tell you what the solution for your country is going to be. I hope that you have it and you're able to legally explain or just accomplish it one day. What I can tell you is the UN will be there for you when the system allows us or invites us to be there, to be part of the change, and we're eager to do so. We are monitoring the situation. Beyond that, we're limited by the other member states who don't allow us to do much.
Muchas gracias.
Un placer. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Kurt Broadbelt, Curtin University, Australia.
How many Australians here, by the way? Okay, I see.
Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Yes. Yeah, she kind of beat me to the punch, so I'll piggyback off that question.
Okay.
And not to say that the 2 situations are the exact same, but if the UN aren't going to help the people of Hong Kong, does the UN, actually, no, sorry, does the world at large have a responsibility to intervene when people think that their freedoms are being imposed on by a government which they didn't even choose?
So they're reporting and monitoring mechanisms at the UN, the Human Rights Council and the Security Council that monitor those situations. The people of Hong Kong and the people of China and the people anywhere in the world, they need to, again, find ways to bring about change within the system, trying to do it legally first, and then continue with the law second. Okay, don't break the law. As I said, protest for the sake of protesting, okay, what's your plan afterwards? Because the problem is, if you have a protest and you fight very, very hard to be heard, and all of a sudden you bring about change, and okay, this is my protest. The moment you don't have a plan of action, and you're caught off guard, and they say, okay, what do you want? No, we're just here protesting in the street. No, but exactly what do you want? The moment you prove them right, you've lost the cause for 20 years. Be wise in how you fight. Be wise in how you protest. How do we protect the rights of individuals? We have monitoring mechanisms. As I said, the Human Rights Council is one of them, the Security Council. If there's violation of human rights, the High Commissioner for Human Rights will take a look into the situation, and they will address to the Security Council and the member states. There can be sanctions. It is not the way to operate in the world. Sanctions and imposition of resolutions against countries and things like that. Again, is this a human rights violation or not situation? If it is determined by the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Human Rights Council of the UN as such, then there are mechanisms to bring about the conversation to the UN and see if we can bring change. I know that it's been halted, if I'm not mistaken, still the law is not enforced or it's just in the air, but there's still the protests. I'm very uncertain what it is, because for as much as I read the media and I listen to the news and I watch as much as I can, I'm still not exactly sure what the full issue is with regards to the government's position. I know, again, the extradition issue, but I'm just curious what it comes from, what has motivated them, what makes them think that, I'm just curious about it. So I'm not very well educated in the whole system to tell you this is the solution, but the UN in this specific case keeps an eye, monitors, and then hopefully brings about the conversation to see if other actors can help in the area or within the two countries.
Okay. I suppose what I was trying to ask, sorry, is with like, do you know about Xinjiang, for example, in like the west of China?
Yeah.
How do you, what does the world do when they're contending with a government which is so big and so powerful that it just seems like there's nothing that anyone can do, basically?
I said this before, don't give up hope, but what you call the world is, what does the world let the UN do? Or what does the international community do? Because hopefully no one will operate outside of the boundaries of the UN. Unilateral movements have caused much more damage than any good in the world. So it's multilateralism, and I will say this again, multilateralism is the way to go, which is let's all talk with all parties on the issue, and let's bring about things. The conversation has to take place. What is the international community doing when there's an oppression of a system, or when the regime seems to be oppressing, or when there's an individual or a group that, again, is about let's analyze the situation, let's see how we can come up with a solution. I don't have the solution. If I had it, I would be there right now doing it. But what I say is that it's not for me to have the solution, it's how can we all come together, because someone has to compromise. In any diplomatic negotiation, everyone, all parties have to compromise, some more than others. But the goal is, what do I have to give up to be able to accomplish my real goal? What is it really to give in to something to be able to ensure that my people are secure and that the people I represent legally have their rights protected? And when we talk about the conversation and say, okay, let's have all the cards on the table and let's talk up, there's no limits to the conversation, then you have a very good beginning. I know that this has been going on for weeks now, and this seems not to be a solution, but it's something that the solution has to come from within the community. Again, don't expect solutions to national problems or bilateral relations to come from the outside. We can give you advice, we can give support, but if you're starting looking for shopping for solutions in the US or in Spain or France, rarely that happens. We have seen how that has worked with Palestine and Israel, for example. The international community thinking, oh, let's do this, let's do a summit. That hasn't led us very place. So let us monitor the situation, let us see how we can, but let us listen to everyone who is on the ground and see if we can really identify key elements so that we can negotiate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
And for our last question, on the left-hand side.
Hello, I'm Yuan Xuechun from Sichuan University, China. So I want to say is that about Hong Kong, Xinjiang, you know, if you don't know the whole truth, please don't do the judgment so early. And so, and And my question is about is related something about it, because there's an invisible wall in some areas, and some voice can't get in, some voice can't get out, and people will be people may be seduced to believe some part of the truth and cause some conflicts. So about this war, so how what the UN can do about this, and what can we do about this? So thank you.
That was close. So thank you. And it's always important to know that there are two sides to the story. As I said, the whole question is, let's bring people together to talk about the issue, and let's try to come up with solutions. And someone has to give in some way. You point something very important that I always point out, and I don't know how it didn't come out before, but it's going to come out now. Media, the power of media in the world. Media bias, particularly. You see, my problem is that media has become a source of opinion more than information throughout the world. That media outlets are motivated for political, social, and economical interests, and not so much for informational ones. Because if I turn on the CNN on the US and then Fox News, they will report on the same issue with completely different points of view. And the problem is that people do not take the time to educate themselves to see, okay, what is the truth in here? Who is telling it? Who is closer to the reality? We don't make an effort because in this case, you have China, Hong Kong, which is, okay, it's far away. Is there issues? People protesting, let them handle it, and that's it. That's how most people in the world, in my country, in Spain, my friends are saying, who cares? Well, we care, because there's, again, human rights issues there that are important to take into consideration. So are we really being informed? Are we really educated on how the situation is? As I said, I don't know the whole situation, so my only point is always the same one. Bring people to the table, let's talk about solutions, let's come up with proposals. Someone has to give in, someone has to give up, and someone has to compromise in certain things. But let's do it legally, let's do it in a way that doesn't result in injury or in anyone being hurt for any reason. Political discussion is extremely important to separate from human rights discussions. Sometimes we politicize the system. Sometimes we justify politically certain moves and certain actions, and the media feeds on that. They love that. They love to, oh, I'm going to get this and that. I'm a strong proponent of freedom of the press. A strong press means democracy. Strong press means that people are aware and informed. But I'm also a huge proponent of monitoring media. We need to ensure not to censor, but to ensure that what is going to happen is that we get the information that we need and not the biased opinion that the headquarters of the entity or the, I don't know, the boss or the chief or the owner of the outlet is pushing for. So how do we do that? Listen to all parties, listen to all outlets, and then come up with your own decisions. One of the problems we find today is that people, if I watch CNN, I will believe in CNN. That means I'm leaning mostly towards the left in the US, so I'm already biased in that sense. And if I watch Fox News, I will be biased in another way. And biases are real. She's gonna kill me for this. Sorry, I'm gonna take 2 more minutes.
Okay.
I've had some training recently at the UN on biases. And there was a very interesting story. A father and a son, you probably have heard this one. A father and a son are driving in a car. Well, the father's driving, the son is a minor. They have an accident, and the father dies, and the son is brought to the hospital. And when the son is in the operating table, the surgeon comes into the operating room, looks at the child on the table and says, I cannot operate on him because he's my son. It took 35 minutes in the room to come up with the answer. The mother is the surgeon. The problem is that our biases do not associate certain roles or certain jobs with women. We just associate with men. So we have biases, unperceived biases constantly. We have solutions as, well, it's adoptive father. It is a gay couple, so there are 2 fathers into the, many different solutions, but the most obvious one, which is, okay, if it's the parent of the child, it has to be the mother if the father died, right? Again, that's the bias that we were working on. It could be another father, it could be... Those biases come because we consume media constantly. We are influenced, we are pushed by culture, by tradition, by history, by education. We are tainted. We need to unlearn certain things. Racism is learned, racism can be unlearned. Discrimination can be learned, so it can be also unlearned. And the more exposed I am to as many outlets as possible, as many sources of information as possible, the better equipped I will be to identify what is happening, the truth, and then act accordingly. At the UN, we have no motivation. Our only bias is humanity. So you bring human rights to us, you bring certain issues to us, and you bring the information, I will make sure that we report on the situations that are going on. As I said, the UN is monitoring the situation. We're not taking action. We have denounced that if there are violations of human rights, they need to be reported. And then we're hoping that the bilateral relations between the two countries and the leaders can come up with a solution. I said to him, and I will tell you again, there's no solution for a conflict internally outside. Please, and don't think that solutions to conflicts come from the external parties. You can motivate, you can educate, but you cannot find solutions for specific situations.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to, we Chinese may be timid as you think, but respect first, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, delegates, for...
I understand that we are running out of time and we
Yes,
don't
we
have
have,
one more question, but then
unfortunately.
I just want to say like one
You'll
sentence.
be able to talk to Felipe after
Yes,
the session.
but then I also want to talk to other people that I understand that as the head of like the communication, there are so many countries, so many problems happening in the world. I'm from Hong Kong, and then if you want to know more about Hong Kong, please feel free to talk to me later. Any delegate here, Chinese, Western people, whatever, if you want to learn more about Hong Kong, this is what the symposium is about. Just talk to me, feel free to talk to me in the coming couple of days. Thank you.
Absolutely.